Hello, and welcome to another episode of Pay Attention. I'm Holly McNeil, the Mindfulness Architect, back in sunny Southern California after spending 2 weeks leaf peeping in Vermont. And you'd be surprised how many people don't know what leaf peeping means, but it means you go up to Vermont and New England and you peep at all the amazing colors on the leaves. In fact, they have to close roads down because there's so many people that go leaf peeping. They stop at people's houses, knock on the door. Where are the parking lots? Where are the bathrooms? So it's a beautiful season for Vermonters, but lots of people. But since my sister lives there, I kind of figure I have an in. Anyway, today I'm very, very excited to introduce a guest to you for two reasons. One is that she's a doctor of psychology, and she can really speak to one of the four modalities, the pillars I've talked about that I came across as an architect pulling the pieces together on my journey that really helped me understand how the mind works, the profound power of creativity it has, and how it and the other modalities tell us that we are not our thoughts, emotions, and feelings, our habits, patterns, and defaults, that we are so much more. So she can speak to that today, which is super cool. Plus, she has a story of resilience, a story of taking something challenging and making it powerful. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Kate Lund. Kate, thank you so much. You want to call you Dr. Lund or Kate today?
Usually people call me Dr. Kate.
Dr. Kate, perfect. Love it. Thank you. Dr. Kate, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today. Tell us your story. We'd love to hear it.
Well, thank you so much, Holly, for having me. I really appreciate it. And I love what you mentioned about the leaf peeping, actually, because we were in Connecticut visiting one of my boys right around the same time that you were in Vermont, and the leaves were beautiful. So that was kind of a refreshing angle for us, given that we're here in rainy Seattle.
Yeah, it is rainy there. And we might have been there at the same time because the leaves stay more colorful the further south you go. So my sister and I went down to Connecticut to see some of those beautiful leaves. So anyway,
so just thought I'd pop that in there because it's exciting. Yeah,
but don't get more people in Vermont. There's lots of leaf peepers. Anyway, please go ahead.
I love it. So my story really goes back to the beginning of my life, really. At 4, I was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, which is a medical condition where the cerebrospinal fluid doesn't circulate as it should, causes pressure to build up on the brain. So at 4, all of a sudden I showed up with really bad headaches, throwing up in the middle of the night. The imaging technology wasn't so good back then. And so therefore, doctors were really baffled. I had been this healthy, vibrant child, and all of a sudden I had these confusing symptoms and wasn't functioning. It was really, really hard. And so finally, a eye doctor was able to see the pressure in my brain building up during an eye exam. And so all sorts of things were done, and it was figured out that I had hydrocephalus. And from there, the good news is hydrocephalus is managed with something called a shunt. So, it's basically like a pump, which is inserted in the ventricle of the brain, which then circulates the fluid that isn't circulating on its own.
Okay.
So, my childhood was really defined by that, unfortunately, in and out of the hospital, lots of time, missing school, coming back to school, looking different, feeling different, that sort of thing. So it was a challenge for sure.
Especially as a child. Being a child, in general is hard enough. I can't imagine.
Yeah. So it was a challenge for sure. But, I was quite fortunate in that I had lots of support from my parents. I had some good friends at school. I had the parents of those friends, all of these things. And so they helped me to really see that, I was more than this diagnosis. And the challenges came up, the hospitalizations, the coming back after prolonged amounts of time away. But the support that I had helped me see myself as much more than that situation. And that was amazing. Awesome because it helped me to see the possibilities on the other side of the challenges. And really, I think, set the trajectory for my ability to move forward in general.
That is amazing. And it is really dependent on the support you have as a child. When you're young, you're so vulnerable anyway. And then to have this illness on top of it, I'm just so grateful for you that you had that. Is that why then you decided to go into psychology? Because you could see more as you were younger that the possibilities?
Well, I think that my career choice, my trajectory into psychology absolutely had a lot to do with my early experiences. You know, it's not something obviously that I'm out there sharing with my patients or anything like that
Yeah.
on a regular basis, but definitely is sort of a placeholder in my mind about, you know, wanting to help, wanting to give back. And I think it goes back to those early days when I really learned to understand and appreciate individual difference and what that means and how it's so important to, help kids, help people in general believe in their possibility within their own unique context and to really appreciate what that is and where they're capable of going. And so it all comes back to those early experiences, but also my aptitudes in school really lined up with becoming a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
I had a earlier dream of becoming a pediatrician, but
Okay.
some of those prolonged absences really kind of shifted me off of the math path, and I
Mm.
fell behind, and I never really caught up in the math domain. So I'm not
Mm.
sure that medical school would have been the best fit for me, but doctorate in psychology was an excellent fit for me. And
Yeah.
so it all comes together, right? The
It
way it's
does. Everything, you hate to hear that everything happens for a reason. Life is pushing you or showing you the direction that you need to go, that the world needs you in. I want to go back. You said something about the importance of everybody's individual differences. What do
Hmm.
you mean by that exactly? Just,
Yeah. Yeah. So, we're all different, right? We're all
of
coming
course.
from unique places, different contexts and such. And, in my experience as a kid with this challenge, I would come back to school looking different much of the time. I'd have like half a shaved head, I'd had
Right.
surgery, stitches. I just didn't, I wasn't fitting in from that perspective very easily. And so there was some ridicule, there was some, cutting down because I was looking different, that sort of thing. And that really built my empathy for others who were
Right.
struggling in various ways.
Right.
And, really this idea was again highlighted when my own boys were in elementary school. One of them, very cerebral, very thoughtful, sort of socially, emotionally evolved beyond his years when he was 8, when he was 6 or 7 or 8. And the boys didn't give him an easy time for that. He was wondering why people were saying what they were saying and why did you say this mean thing to that girl in our class? Like, why did you say that mean thing to me? And most of the boys at 6, 7, 8 are happy if they've got the football. Where's the football? I'm happy.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Wow.
he was cut down a lot and
Wow.
really bothered me. And so I actually wrote a book. This is the spark that got me writing my book, Bounce: Help Your Child Build Resilience and Thrive in School, Sports,
Nice.
and Life. And one of the pillars of, I believe, our fundamental resilience is this ability to understand and appreciate individual difference and what that means for us and what it means for other people. And
Right.
so that's basically the long and the short of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and what it means, especially for a child. But even, like you said, as we get older, because we take those patterns, and if we don't have that support, and being ridiculed, even if you have support, is very difficult. It's as a child, our limbic system, right, our emotional center is in charge, and our frontal cortex isn't there yet. So it's always our fault. There's nobody else.
Right.
So we, even as adults, we carry that with us. So
Yeah.
yes, you authored a book. That's wonderful. You spent 20 years treating patients, and tell us how your practice developed and over the years.
Sure, absolutely. So I graduated from college with a degree in psychology and a minor in journalism. I had this sort of fleeting thought as well that I was going to become a broadcast journalist. And
Nice. I love it.
I went and I spent a semester of my senior year in college in Washington, D.C., studying broadcast journalism and doing an internship at the White House
Wow.
with the communications team. And that was an amazing experience. Loved it.
Amazing.
Found, however, that the whole broadcast journalism thing, the intensity of it, the hair, the makeup, what's needed to be on TV, a little bit much for me. So wasn't really going to be my thing, but I loved DC. So I moved back to DC. I wasn't ready to go back to graduate school quite yet, and worked in public relations and marketing for the Discovery Channel and PBS. And it was awesome. It was an amazing experience.
It sounds amazing.
But I always knew in the back of my mind that, I really wanted to be a psychologist, and I was going to shift back in that direction. So met my husband in DC, we got married and moved to Boston.
Okay.
Stayed in the PR and marketing for another year as I got my ducks in a row for graduate school. And then it was time to go, and I started with a master's. Worked for a year at the master's level and really solidified this idea that, yes, I want to get the doctorate.
Okay.
Did that training in Boston, and it was amazing. Really specialized in medical psychology and child psychology, working with kids and families at Boston Children's, Boston Shriners Hospital for Children, and just loved what those experiences taught me, how they kind of shaped my trajectory for all of my thoughts about resilience, overcoming medical challenge, overcoming challenge of any kind, really. And my career really evolved from there. I mean, I like to say I'd probably still be at Shriners if we hadn't moved about 17 times with my husband's job. But, such is life, right?
Right. Well,
things work out for a reason.
They do.
So that's really how it evolved. And it's, I've built on it from there in sort of an eclectic way. We had twin boys in 2007.
Nice.
And so I flexed things up a bit for the boys' early years, and have really wanted to stay portable and flexible to be as available as I have been able to be for them since that point. But, I've still been able to have a really robust, meaningful career. So There's no perfect balance in life, but I think it's come together pretty well.
Yeah, sounds great. I've moved 32 times, and the more you move, the more you change, the less scary change can be, right?
Yes, exactly. Wow, 32 times. That's intense.
Yes, I've lived in all 4 continental time zones. This is the first time I've lived south.
Wow.
And I like it here. There's no winter. But I love your story, Dr. Kate. And as I listen to it, it starts to unfold because you and I have met before on your podcast, and we've talked about your desire to now take this story of resilience and what you've learned and move it forward. But I didn't know about the journalism and working in Washington, because that really folds in well, right? You had said that putting on the makeup and wasn't for you, but hey, if you want to go out there and speak, sometimes I don't even put on makeup, right? It's not fair, right? Men don't. Well, you don't have to do anything, right?
Right.
But it's just the idea that you want to be out there. So I love the fact that you want to now take this and to a bigger audience. So can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so these principles of resilience and how we can thrive and build within our own unique context, how we can keep our eye on possibility on the other side of challenge. Mm-hmm. These are all my sort of core messages that I really do want to share on a broader scale through speaking or developing courses or, books that I've got in the pipeline. And so those are really important ideas to me because, I've been doing this work for a very long time, one-on-one with clients and patients. And, that's very powerful, very meaningful. But I think there's a broader way that we can get those same messages out there to try to help more people. And my podcast is another avenue that I'm developing to make this same idea happen.
The optimized mind. Right,
Yes,
right,
yes,
right,
yes.
right. Well, similar. You and I are similar in the respect that we had this full blown career, and then kind of. I took probably a 180 from
Mhm.
architecture, but you are going to be speaking not only from your story, but also from your experience as a psychologist and your work as a journalist when you were younger, right? You've got it all going on. So I really think it's great. And I really believe, as my listeners hopefully know by now, that if you believe something, you really want something, the mind is very powerful, right?
Right. That is
And
such a good point. Yes.
yeah, and I'm sure we'll see you, speaking out there. Why don't we talk about, one or two of your pillars of resilience that you want to share with our listeners today that they can take away with them?
Sure, absolutely. So I would say the first one that I'd love to highlight is this idea of managing your emotions and tolerating frustration.
Okay.
And really what I mean by that is, taking time each day in a way that works for you to quiet your central nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
to really sort of become quiet and still in a sense. Because as we're moving through life at lightning speed,
Right.
and it's really important to bring that down, right? Because if we're up here all the time and then a challenge hits and we escalate like this,
Yeah.
point of shutdown, we're really going to have difficulty, right? So if we're kind of at a modulated place consistently, we're going to, face the challenge. We're going to ebb and flow a little bit, but we're
Right.
not going to escalate to the point of shutdown.
Right.
So this is the
I hear
core
you.
point.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, core point that I really work with everybody on developing, because there's no one size fits all. I teach a principle developed by a physician in Boston, Herbert Benson, based on his relaxation response method. But
Mm-hmm.
really, there's so many different ways that people can quiet their minds, and it's a
Yeah.
question of finding a way that works for them.
Yeah, and I absolutely hear you, because before we started recording, I was telling Dr. Kate that I'm going to speak at a convention tomorrow, and water flows and wind blows and ego speaks, and I was up at that higher level, and I recognize that if I stay up there, I mean, this is like 2 days before I speak. When I get there, it's just going to be over the top,
Right.
right? So
Right.
spending
Right.
that time calming. And you're right. There's what I love about my journey and the practices, and is that they're all pointing back to a few simple things, right? About calming. I didn't even really understand what meditation was for the
Mhm.
longest time.
Yeah.
At one point I came across a definition in Tibetan, gom, which means to become familiar with your mind, right? Which is
Mhm.
very powerful to me, but also in just finding that calm, that deep calm. I
Yeah.
was teaching in a class last night about the different brain waves, and how if you're
Mhm.
staying up in beta and gamma, right, all the
Yep.
time, you're never going
Mhm.
to find those insights in that calm, and to practice being in that calm. So that's an excellent point about resilience, right? When you have that calm space at time, use it to become familiar with that calm, so it's there when you need it.
Yes, absolutely. And, sometimes it's a challenge to help folks get into the routine, the rhythm.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, it doesn't have to be sort of a long kind of cumbersome process. It can be done in short increments throughout
Absolutely.
the day, and really important just to integrate that and integrate what works for you. And so,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I resonate with what you're saying related
Yeah,
to it.
repetition is key, and it's about creating the habit
Mhm.
of finding that calm. And absolutely, it doesn't have to be arduous. One of the main reasons that meditation or people shy away from it, because it seems so heavy and laden and arduous. But you can do it 1 minute 6 times a day. I talk about sometimes, and you're right. It can just be short spurts of time, but just making it a habit so that when you need it, it's there for you. I
Yes,
love it.
absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
it.
So that's a really important one. And
Okay, what else you got?
the other one is, really to stay focused on the possibility on the other side of challenge. Sort of
Nice.
recognize that we're not always going to succeed the first time out of the gate.
Right.
And that's normal and natural. We're
Yes.
going to fail. We're going to have challenges. But
You're gonna learn from that, right?
yeah, if we can see that as a learning opportunity, and if we can sort of use flexible thinking to come up with alternative angles or strategies for perhaps trying the same thing, we're really going to bolster our sense of resilience, really, our foundational ability to move through and beyond challenge and stay focused on the possibility. And part of that is developing sort of an optimistic lens, kind of grounded in gratitude. And
Nice.
really thinking each day, at the end of the day, the beginning of the day, about 3 to 5 things that we're grateful for on that day,
Yeah.
amidst all of the challenges that we're facing, because challenge is inevitable. It's going to happen, right? But how can we quell the impact of that challenge by thinking about the things that are going well? Because, as we know, human nature will go to that. All the things
Yes. We
that
have
aren't
this
going well.
negative bias, right, to
And I
keep us
should have
safe.
done this, and I
Yep.
could have done this, and why didn't I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Really, if we jot down, if we think about 3 to 5 things that went well on a given
Right.
day, we've got sort of this running track record. It really
Mm-hmm.
helps to shift our overall outlook.
It does. It train in gratitude. Again, we're training, making it part of your biocomputer so that it's there when it's available. I love it. It's this power of believing, right? No matter where you're at in the moment is a testament to how powerful the mind is,
Yeah,
and the mind, one of the jobs of the mind is to protect its programming. And so if we're constantly doing the belittling and engaging with that negative self-talk, that's what it's going to protect. But if we can create these new habits of calm and of belief and resilience and gratitude, it's going to not only protect that, but move your life in that direction. So
exactly.
absolutely.
Precisely. Yeah.
You're speaking to the choir here. You got anything else for us before we wind down?
Yeah, well, I think that sort of modeling these kind of outlooks, behaviors, what have you, for our children is so
Oh
important, so
gosh.
that we're helping them to also develop this foundation in resilience so that they can have as strong a foundation as possible moving forward. And that's actually the topic of my forthcoming book
Nice.
in the next probably 6, 8 months or so, on resilient parenting, and really focuses on this idea of calming the central nervous system, modeling these things for our kids, and
Yeah.
hopefully being resilient together.
So important. I believe I hear you, and that's kind of one of my foundations too. Eventually, well, not just eventually, I'm speaking to college students, but to get to them, help them understand how the mind works. Do you have a title for your upcoming book?
It's called Step Away: Keys to Resilient Parenting.
Tease to nice.
No, keys.
Keys. Oh, keys. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
I love it. All
that's
right. Well,
the working title. The working.
yeah, I'm sure it could change. I've been working on a book myself. Hopefully I'll get it out. I think it's had 6 titles so far, but
Right. And that happens, right? That's kind of par for the process.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you, Dr. Kate, so much for being with us today. Where can our listeners reach you, or do you have any kind of shout out, whatever you want to, anything you want to close with saying today?
Yeah, well, sure. I'm very much available on LinkedIn, so that's a great place to get me, as well as my website, which is www.katelundspeaks.com.
Nice.
And then, of course, if anyone wants to take a listen to the podcast, that would be awesome too. The Optimized Mind.
Optimized Mind, right? And we will put those links in the description. Kate, Dr. Kate, thank you so much. It just brings me joy to speak to people like you. That it's amazing to me as an architect coming into this that we all speak the same language when we're trying to find that strength and resilience within us. So thank you so much for coming on today. If you can stay after for a few minutes, I'd appreciate it.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you, Holly, for having me. This has been great.
Yes, and thank you, listeners. I hope you join us for another episode of Pay Attention. When I decided to start this podcast. I was a little anxious about it myself, keeping up in the higher levels, but it's actually been pretty joyful for me. And I hope that you found some joy and peace in it as well. So until the next time, thank you and namaste.